this. I guess there.
All right, you've got my consent.
Everyone's consented. We're all good to go. We're official. All righty. Well, first off, thanks everyone for joining in, and hopefully, like I said, a few more folks will tune in. We're going to be talking a little bit today about how crowdfunding can make an impact in the world of climate change, climate solutions, climate tech, and the various surrounding elements. My name is Mark Kapczynski. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer over at a new equity crowdfunding platform and FINRA broker-dealer called Energy Shares. And just for context, our whole platform, we're actually launching our first investable listings probably by the end of next month. I think we should be ready. We're actually doing it in partnership with Justly, but our whole focus at Energy Shares is utility scale renewable energy projects. So large scale projects, and typically at the what's called development stage. So no construction, it's all the work that goes on before the projects get constructed. So that's a little bit of context on Energy Shares, and I was excited to have the opportunity to moderate this panel, as it's near and dear to our heart. We have a few other folks with us. So Jesse from Jewelcase. Jesse, I'll ask you to introduce yourself in a second, and then Franz and Jackie from Raise Green. Also, I think equally passionate about our space. And Franz, you and I didn't have the chance of connecting beforehand, but I heard you're an expert in all things climate change. So I'm excited to pick your brain here on this panel a little bit. So that's hopefully a little bit of context for everyone as they're tuning in. Why don't we go ahead, and if Jackie, Franz, and Jesse, if you guys are all set, we can go ahead and get started. And I think you guys have all the prep questions and stuff, so we'll kind of start out with some introductions. We'll do some Q&A, and then if anyone who's just listening in, if you have a question, just either raise your hand, or better yet, just put the question in chat, and then I'll follow along and call those out to the group as we go along, and just be patient with me as we go. So with that, Jesse, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself first, because I feel like we've done this a few times, and I will have to just first call out that your episode of the Energy Shares podcast went live yesterday. So, you know, you're always a celebrity in our world. So, you know, Jackie and Franz, I'm going to hit you up next for being a guest on our podcast. So hopefully you guys are willing participants.
Yeah, Mark, thank you, and I'm honored. You know, the first time we met, which was in Los Angeles, you know, I was on stage, and you know, the other guests at that time just you know, randomly dropped, like, the last time I talked to Bill Gates, had a conversation with Bill Gates, and likewise, you know, sitting here with Franz and Jackie, you know, I will glean any sort of you know, thought leadership position off what they've established. I will you know, draft off that all I can. But yeah, my name is Jesse.
You and me both, Jesse. You and me both.
Yeah. Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Initiatives for Jewelcase, and we are a modular portable energy storage systems manufacturer based out of Boise, Idaho. I'm located in San Diego, California, and you know, Jewelcase, the whole, you know, impetus for Jewelcase is we want to reduce carbon emissions. I mean, that's what we're all about. In early 2022, we made a key strategic company direction change away from kind of the consumer-centric market towards the B2B market, and it has paid off extremely well for us. So our main market area of focus right now is mobile businesses, and how can we replace generators for things like food trucks, foam insulation, dog groomers, things like that, things that you don't necessarily expect right away of tapping into you know, the mobile power space, the things that are incredibly impactful. Also in 2022, through, you know, the early part of this year, we closed up an equity crowdfunding round. You know, that was on the WeFunder platform, where we raised about $2.2 million from about 2,200 individual investors. Likewise, I first met Mark when we were awarded the Clean Tech Deal of the Year by Startup Starter for 2022. So coming into my work with Jewel Case, did not know a lot about crowdfunding, and now I probably know too much. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, just as a further context, when I met Jesse at the Startup Starter conference for Equity Crowdfunding Week last year, he was outside roaming around the parking lot, counting all the different generators and figuring out prospects for his business, I think. So, well, welcome again, Jesse. Jackie, since I talked to you the other day, why don't you introduce yourself and Raise Green, and then we'll switch over to Franz after that, and then we'll dive into some Q&A.
Sure. Can you hear me? Excellent. So first of all, I'm dialing in from Italy. I'm on my first vacation in 4 years.
All right, what city? You have to tell us what city.
I am in a town called Levanto. It's just outside of Cinque Terre, which is on the Ligurian coast, and it is spectacular. Every time I come,
little late there.
It is, but it's earlier than the one I did yesterday. So, and it's always worth it. Super Crowd 23. I've said this before. Super Crowd 22 was probably the best event I participated in the entire year. It is, it's my people, it's impact, it's crowdfunding, and what can you say? And of course, it's run by Devin, so it's all good. So my name is Jackie Logan. I am a co-founder and chief investment officer at Raise Green. Raise Green is the climate investment platform. We are a funding portal, and we are 100% focused on financing, working with folks that are either doing renewable energy projects or creating climate solutions, climate technologies, and looking to raise capital. And we work with those folks to get all their paperwork together, get them up on our platform, and then open them up to investment for as little as $100. So my background is in the securities markets, 25 years. And in my last role, just decided that all the ESG and all these, all this stuff was not going to get us there fast enough. And I wanted to take my background and get private capital moving directly into climate solutions. And had the great fortune of meeting my co-founder, Franz, in 2019. And a few conversations later, I jumped ship and joined, and never looked back. So we did our first offering in July of 2020. We've done 26 securities offerings. I've been on vacation, so maybe it's 27. I'll let Franz take that over. And we have a growing pipeline, and we're just super excited about our future. We think what we're doing is super important for everyone. Let me hand it over to Franz.
Thanks. Welcome, Jackie. Franz, nice to meet you. Love to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you, Mark and Jesse and Jackie. Good to see you. We haven't spoken in a week or so now, but which is good. But I am Franz Hochstrasser, CEO, co-founder of Raise Green, and I come at this crowdfunding work and the capital markets with a background actually in climate policy and finance at the federal government level, as well as in the political realm. So I was a community organizer back on the 2008 Obama campaign in Iowa, and rode that wave all the way to DC, where I worked for 8 years under President Obama at the White House, as well as the State Department and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the way that turned into Raise Green really is that coming out of the Paris Agreement negotiations, right after all the nations in the world had adopted it, we're walking out, and I remember everyone started talking immediately about, well, now we have to implement it. Now we have to implement. And there's so much work to do to implement that, I took that away and went back to graduate school, at the School of Environment at Yale, and really focused in on how are we going to implement, you know, the Paris Agreement. How are we going to deploy climate solutions in a way that makes them accessible to everyone? So, you know, how do we get solar on low to moderate income homes and multifamily housing? How do we get energy efficiency into every household in America? And then again, you know, electricity into the billion or so households across the country or the world that don't have it. And so solution to that, in our view, or in my view at the time, and in starting the company back as a grad student, was we need to get more people involved in creating the solutions. We need more talent working on climate in general. And then we need so much more capital flowing into the space. You know, at the time, there was about $300 billion a year globally flowing into climate solutions. And now there's close to, you know, if you ask Bloomberg, it's $1.1 trillion last year. But then if you look at the International Energy Agency or the UNFCCC, they're saying we need at least $4.5 trillion per year going into climate and clean energy between now and mid-century. And so how do we get that money off of the sidelines onto the front lines of you know, building the kinds of projects, Mark, that you guys are helping to fund as well, but everything on down, you know, energy efficiency, solar, wind, and then the breakthrough technologies that are going to help us address, you know, the harder to abate sectors of the economy, like aviation fuels and, you know, transportation and on down the line, and manufacturing. So
Yeah.
that's what we do at Raise Green, is we use the tools of crowdfunding to try to mobilize everybody that we can, the 90% of Americans who are non-accredited investors, and get them into the climate fight by voting with their dollars.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think Jesse and I have talked about this a lot. It seems like you have to really just get the whole, you know, country, certainly, as if we just start in the US, right, moving this direction and thinking about how do we actually make a difference. And so it takes a lot of effort, and it takes sort of all of our collective efforts to make a difference. So I did want to kind of start the discussion around this idea of, like, you know, people use these phrases, Devin used it, right? Like impact investing in climate solutions. So, like, what does that actually even mean? And so, Jesse, maybe I'll start with you, you know, because I guess you're one of the solutions. So, you know, do you want to kind of talk about what does it mean to you to either, you know, receive funds under, you know, from investors in this notion of making an impact, and what do you think the real impact that, you know, people are trying to make with their dollars is, right? How do you think investors think about that? Right, so it's kind of a multi-part here, and then we'll kind of go from there. And Jackie, I want to hear from you and Franz as well. So Jesse, why don't you start us off with a little vision?
Yeah. Well, you know, go back to, you know, fall of 2021, where we started to embark on our crowdfunding journey. And we really had a philosophical, you know, discussion about that. For one, and, you know, this is the drive to all quote unquote sustainable or ESG companies. Like, well, you can't just have a mission, even if it have a mission that's not linked to action. Right? Even if your product does well for the company, you still need to back that up with your values, your mission, you know, how that comes forth. And we certainly saw an opportunity, and it's our belief that the transition to renewable energy is a one-time, once in a ever opportunity. And once we go there, once we invest in the infrastructure and the technology to actually make that a viable and the most ubiquitous source of our energy, there's not going to be any going back. And so we saw an opportunity to help with the income inequality question, right? Everyone's going to be affected by this shift. So why shouldn't more people participate and reap the benefits? Now, you know, I'm sure that at some point there's going to be consolidation, and, you know, people with resources, in this case, probably oil companies, will start to, you know, snatch up companies when they see the opportunity. Well, if that happens, hopefully we can spread out that equity and that value, you know, across many different consumer groups. You know, we have Our median investment, again, I said 2,200 investors. Our median investment was $250. And we had $100 all the way up to $50,000 in investments that came in through the equity crowdfunding round. So I think it's really interesting because when I started prepping for this call, I did think of it as political organizing in a way, right? And I think about it on like macro community and micro community scales. Of we are building towards the bigger drive, like globally, towards sustainability. But we have an opportunity with crowdfunding to bring our own micro communities along with us that feed into that bigger community. And so, for me and how I try to position Jewel Case is along those lines of kind of the micro and macro interrelation, and even how we try to provide our investors with tools to allow them to have easy conversations with their friends that they can post on social media channels. Like there's small tactical things like that, but it really is this pursuit of, you foster your own community to build a larger community.
Quick follow-up. How do you think your investors perceived investing in Jewel Case? Did they perceive it as, wow, we're making a difference, or this is just a great deal, right? And sort of, who cares, what happens, right? It's like, do you think the notion of impact investing resonated with them, and that's part of what they were seeking?
It's a wide swath, and many times it does kind of fall under socioeconomic kind of variables, but there are the people like, wow, this is cool, this is the future. And so there's, a big cohort of investors that fell into that group. And then there are ones just like, oh, there's money to be made here, and I'm going to put my dollars there. So we really saw the whole gamut of investments and investment philosophy. I think that there's just a desire to be part of communities, and there's actually upside to being part of this community. It's not just to suck on your time and your resource investment, but there actually could be, hopefully will be, a payback to that as well.
It's muted. That's great. Thanks, Jesse. Jackie, do you want to go next and kind of comment around how you guys see impact investing tied to these climate solutions, climate tech solutions, offerings, and so on, and how does that resonate with your investor pool?
Sure. So first of all, everything we do at Raise Green is related to climate. So folks that come to our platform, either because they've come directly to Raise Green because of social media, word of mouth, that kind of thing, or because they've come to Raise Green through one of our issuers, their community coming and joining our community. We find many of the folks that come to our crowdfunding platform to invest in a particular offering stay with us and go on to invest in other offerings. I think, so as a general matter, folks don't come to Raise Green unless they're really interested in impact, and particularly in climate. We also have a fair number of our offerings touching important components of, important social aspects, particularly working in LMI communities. We did several offerings for Block Power, which is bringing energy efficiency to urban communities, largely LMI. We have wonderful offering up on our marketplace currently. I'm not allowed to advertise anything, but focused again on LMI communities. So it's a combination, and we find that our investors are, the story drives them, which is really where the impact is, and they are looking for a financial return, but it's a range. Some folks are more focused heavy on financial return and have thresholds and impact, and other folks are just like, this project or these folks must get the capital. I want to see that project done, and there's a very little consideration of actually what the return is. And I'll turn it over to Franz if he wants to add anything there.
Franz, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. Mark, I think you had a two-part question. First part was kind of what are climate solutions? what are we talking about here? And the, you know, and then the second piece on impact, I think both Jesse and Jackie covered really well. So I'll dig in on the first one particularly. You know, there's really 5 main kind of sectors of the economy that are carbon emitting and are kind of considered to be area or sources of where we need to mitigate carbon pollution. And then we also need to adapt to the impacts of climate change that we're already seeing in every region of the world and every sector of the economy. But we at Raise Green do both mitigation and adaptation finance, but primarily what gets funded and what is profitable right now by way of climate solutions are mitigation. So reducing carbon pollution from those sources of where it's coming from. So transportation is the largest source of emissions in the US. And so we're talking about, you know, electric vehicles, we're talking about micromobility, we're talking about zero emission aviation, we're talking about low carbon fuels and carbon capture in the case of you know, certain exhausts or things that can be controlled there. Energy, as Mark, you know, can probably expound on extensively, is previously the largest source of global or of US emissions. It is still the largest source of global emissions, counts for you know, close to, it was 40% in the US, is now down to about 25 or less percent. But that's, you know, everything from coal-fired power plants and gas-fired power plants to generators and anything that generates electricity, puts it on the grid. And so the solutions to that are zero emission or low emission alternatives to those high emitting sources. And then in the agriculture space, is about 17% of US emissions. You know, that's one of the harder to abate sectors because we have to spend, you know, we have to use to reach production agriculture at scale. You know, lots of fertilizer is used, lots of fuels are used to transport that food to our, you know, dinner plates. And then industry, heavy industry, again, is a difficult to abate sector. We're talking about manufacturing, concrete, that kind of thing. And then lastly, the built environment, which is also a significant source of emissions. And so at Raise Green, we're looking at kind of anything within those verticals as being a viable climate solution on its face, so long as we can show, you know, that there are demonstrable environmental benefits to funding that solution by way of reducing emissions or otherwise, you know, reducing water use or making, you know, using less energy or whatnot. So
have you
yeah,
seen, and maybe you or Jackie can comment on this, have you guys seen any patterns where like it is transportation heavy right now, where the retail investor wants to get in and, you know, wants to get into solutions around transportation? Or Jesse, you know, certainly your space, batteries and storage, right? Are there kind of these macro themes that are standing out right now that people feel like they can make an impact, right? So they connect to those kind of projects? Or do you think it's still, you know, somewhat holistic that they're looking at it? Like, any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, personally, I've seen a lot of enthusiasm around the climate solutions that have been commercialized for some time. So solar especially is like sexy, you know, to people. They like the look of the panels, and it's nice to get you know, energy generated from an inert, you know, object that sits on your roof and collects sun rays. And so solar has been very popular, as has, frankly, energy efficiency, I think, because of the kind of consistency of the payout. We've structured several debt offerings around energy efficiency that have attracted a lot of interest and excitement. And then decarbonization of buildings also, I think, is an increasingly cool source of, or increasingly cool approach to climate solutions. And that's bolstered by the Inflation Reduction Act that provides, both at the household level and at, you know, the commercial level, significant incentives around that. but it also provides significant incentives around literally the entire gamut of climate solutions. So tremendously game-changing piece of legislation in the climate finance and clean energy space.
Jesse, do you want to touch on that as well? Like, do you feel like maybe in your space, it seems like storage is a hot topic amongst other things, is maybe not as sexy as solar panels, but sexy in its own right, I guess. Do you think, storage is having its day as part of this, and that people feel that that's a connection point that they're trying to make? Like, did you observe that in your raise?
Yes, I mean, I'd still think what Franz said is very accurate, and like kind of what are the sexiest projects to fund. But I know I'm biased, but I absolutely think that investment in innovation in energy storage, whether it's a battery system or not, needs to be a bigger part of the investment thesis as a whole. It's great if we generate all this energy, got to put it somewhere. Right? That's just a fact. And the fact that I have 3 energy storage devices on my person right now, just goes to show like how ubiquitous it is, but we just don't even think about it. And then the science and a lot of the literature around why energy storage is important. And I think that there's always with energy storage, there is always the conversation about extraction and the detriments to it. And I think, my drive is to get in and where can we innovate to make extraction less of an impact on the planet? And, how can we, going back to, I always try to think about the micro macro kind of interplay. Batteries in particular, right, have a and hopefully a very small, but smaller extraction footprint, and hopefully we can eliminate that through better energy technology like sodium-based batteries. But what we're doing in trying to remove emissions, right, that has more of a macro effect. That is kind of our near-term goal. That hopefully, and again, this might be the most optimistic thing that will be said in this panel, is hopefully it provides us enough runway so we can actually innovate. And get to the solutions that are actually going to impact the long-term viability of our planet.
Gotcha. So a couple things that I want to maybe call out and get the team's opinion on. One is like, it feels like a lot of, maybe two questions in one here for you guys. One is like, do you think the average retail investor understands this concept of like climate tech, climate solutions, kind of how they participate and make decisions on where to invest? That's maybe the first part. And do you think some of the solutions and offerings around climate tech, climate solutions, and so on tend to promote like the negative, like a negative notion around, the climate change elements of like, the climate, issues that our world are facing are so bad we have to take action. Like, how do you think the retail? Yeah, please jump in
there, because we, raised on WeFunder, so it wasn't a specific minded investor, right? We really did have people from all ranges. I'll say the most impactful things that we communicated were about the basic fundamentals of investment. It's about market size and ROI. I would say, again, I think a part of it's just the retail investors who are on that platform, but they weren't as environmentally focused. But once you could actually tell those personal impact stories, right? This is a food truck owner. They're spending 12 hours a day next to a generator that produces 70 decibels, and what does that do to long-term hearing? They're inhaling emissions for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. What does that do to your health? Oh, by the way, and one of the projects that we work with right now is the Street Vendor Project in New York City. And they represent 20,000 street vendors. Many of them use generators. If you can tell the story that, you're probably familiar, there's not a ton of gas stations in Manhattan. So how do they fuel these 20,000 Honda generators? Well, they have to use an outside service, and generally they pay like $20 a gallon for their fuel to operate their stand. If you can start to tell the impact stories of how a renewable solution is, bettering the impacts there, maybe not even on a climate level, right? That's almost the secondary message. But you need to get there. You need a lead in to be able to tell that environmentally friendly story from what I've seen in our investment group.
That's interesting. So you guys are really focusing in on, here's the practical reality of what people are facing, and then that's the lead in to tell the broader story.
Yeah, it was certainly a learning approach, because we absolutely, like, through the whole lifespan of our company, wanted to leave with an environmental first message.
Yeah.
And it just it has not driven the business results and the investments results that we thought it would. But we know we have a better product. Just flat out, we have a better product that is a better investment for your business long term, right? We're operating in a primarily B2B marketplace right now.
Yeah.
And that has changed, our philosophy is we just have to have a better product, period. Because the product results will kind of speak for itself.
Yeah. Jackie, what about you? What have you guys seen in terms of how the story plays out and what's connecting with folks?
So, I mean, for us, it is first and foremost about the story. And we find that, and this is just true generally in crowdfunding, is those founders that can tell their story in a compelling and clear manner, that's critical. And, look, it's critical in anything, right? If you're trying to gain investment, but particularly in impact investing, because there is this whole other component, which is not about just the financial returns. That's what we find at Raise Green. And so for those founders who are able to really tell the story about, what they're trying to accomplish, who it's going to impact. I just lost my ear set here. We find that that there is a great draw from our investor base, and we've seen it repeatedly. And some investments are more risky than others, but it is really the story that carries the investment interest from our investors.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
I mentioned that our median investment was $250 on Raise Green. What is the median investment, or what's the lowest somebody can invest in? And what I'm getting at is what it seems is like the people who most benefit from these clean solutions are, don't have access. And that's part of the whole play and benefit of crowdfunding. And I kind of want to see this play out with Raise Green. Is it, access oriented?
Yeah. Well, we're very focused on making sure our minimum investment is as low as possible. And obviously that has to work for the issuer as well. Yeah. But typically we're $100. And because a lot of our investments are debt, $100 seems to be a good minimum for everyone around. But we'd go lower because we truly believe that we want to give everybody a chance to participate in climate action. And we have a phrase at Raise Green, which we like to say, which is, what do people do at the end of the march? And they go, you get to the end of the climate march and you're standing there and it's like, people want to do something. And we're like, jump on Raise Green. And for as little as $100, and maybe someday we're going to get that lower, you can do something today and earn a financial return. So our average investment actually is quite high. And that's because we have tons of $100 investors that come back repeatedly. But we also have some folks that come in with pretty big tickets. So our average investment has typically been somewhere between $4,000 and $4,500. And I think in crowdfunding in general, most recently it's somewhere in the $1,500 range. So we have a pretty high average, but it's the whole gambit in terms of investors. And we're very, very focused on that at Raise Green. We truly believe that we want to give everybody a chance to invest and participate in the energy transition. And Franz, I don't know if you have something else you'd like to add.
Yeah, if not Franz, actually, I was maybe what you could do is tie in. Um, how does the IRA act and financing that provides, or tax credits, or whatever the scenario is? How does that play a role in working with the crowdfunding projects that you guys are listing and supporting, and how do your issuers kind of view the IRA and what's available there?
Oh yeah, well, love this question. I'll tell you a story about our very first foray into crowdfunding with me and my original co-founder back in 2018. So we took our own customer journey to learn what it was like to do crowdfunding ourselves, and so we started a company called New Haven Community Solar, and we developed a 11 kilowatt solar project on the rooftop of a nonprofit in New Haven, Connecticut, and we crowdfunded it. The 100% equity sold shares in it, the most challenging part of that was, believe it or not the crowdfunding or developing the project, but was getting what's called in the solar finance business tax equity. And that is an investment arrangement with a private investor to monetize the value of the federal investment tax credit, which is the way that we do energy policy, more or less, or have done in the US for the last decade and a half. And anyone who's been in the business, Mark, as you'll know well, we kind of call it the solar coaster, because the policy at a federal level and at the state level has gone up and down and up and down and all around. And what the Inflation Reduction Act does is it gives us certainty for the next 10 years that you are going to, if you develop a project and you're a nonprofit, you are going to get direct pay, which means you get paid for 30% of the investment amount if you take the ITC upfront. That is tremendous amount of certainty. And similarly, even if you're a private developer, that investment tax credit set at 30% as long as you use prevailing wage, and then you can also stack credits on top of that. If you have low to moderate income off-takers, you can get another 10%. If you have, if you're developing a project in an energy community, you can get another 10%. And so it gives us a base of certainty around clean energy finance from the Treasury Department, tax credits. But then it also gives us a bunch of carrots and cherries on top in the form of grant programs and enhanced incentives. So one great example is $27 billion set aside through the EPA for federal green bank program. So they're going to be deploying that over the next several years, and that's a huge infusion that buys down the upfront costs associated with developing projects, that helps give those folks who are creating climate solutions, whether they be breakthrough solutions that aren't commercialized yet, and they need research dollars, or they're fully commercialized and they just need deployment and support around getting those projects built and that steel in the ground. There's a huge infusion of hundreds of billions of dollars coming into the economy from the federal government.
Do you guys look at, from a Raise Green perspective, do you guys look for issuers that have either connection or opportunity with IRA funds? Is that like something you specifically look out for?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When the bill passed, which again, was a roller coaster in and of itself in the legislative process, we dug in pretty heavily into it and kind of said, look, across the board, according to Climate Tech VC, this is going to reduce the overhead costs of climate technologies by, on average, 40%. And that's mostly driven by the tax credits, but that's everything from, Jesse, the kind of work that you guys are doing in storage, because you now have a storage investment tax credit, to direct air capture, to green hydrogen, and all these other types of less commercialized projects. So yes, we absolutely look for savvy founders that are going after those pots of capital and are looking to monetize them, and then we also try to help them get that. Because we want their projects and their companies to be successful. And part of that in this economy is going to mean going after and winning some of those federal grants, or identifying how to monetize the incentives that are coming through through the government.
And I'd love to just build on that point for a second. And because there's also this amazing opportunity now for tax exempt entities, nonprofits, to actually create their own solar projects and own them. And historically, that is because if the tax incentives in the past, you had to bring in an outside tax equity owner and there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of expense associated with it, and nonprofits and smaller projects really couldn't get done. We now have this whole open door for nonprofits across the United States to actually take advantage of this, create their own solar projects, own them, and benefit from them. And we're actually working with folks right now to do that, and encouraging nonprofits that haven't done it yet to do it.
That's great. Okay, so we're down to, hang on, Jesse, just because we're down to our last 90 seconds before Devin's going to kick us back into the main group. So I want to ask you guys one final quick question. I'll start with you, Jesse, because I think you all have touched on this idea of how do we move faster? How do we move quicker to get all this to happen? How do you answer that question, Jesse? How do we move faster?
I'll just merge the last one. The IRA provides a pathway for a company like ours to have, I'm just going to make up the scenario, sodium-based cell manufacturing in Idaho. That's a benefit for everybody, right?
I love it. Jackie, how do we move faster?
Jump on Raise Green, invest $100, and let's get these projects funded and moving.
Good answer. Franz, how do we move faster?
Yeah, it's put money in the hands of entrepreneurs and companies like Jesse's. We are a tool to make that happen. As at Raise Green, we're a marketplace for that impact investing, but those that are on the front lines again of deploying climate solutions, developing those, manufacturing them, capturing these incentives and putting them to work. That's where the rubber meets the road, and that's what we have to do to solve the climate crisis. And everybody has a role to play. You can put in as little as $100, and you can own a piece of the clean energy transition. Yeah.
And one last thing, the other thing is that folks that are working in climate tech and building new technologies, and they're having struggle getting funding, come give us an email, Jackie at Raise Green, Franz at Raise Green, and we'll try to work with you.
Great. Guys, thank you so. Jesse, real quick, because we're down to 43 seconds.
I heard this stat a couple weeks ago, and I just thought I would leave you as the kind of breathtaking stat of the section. There are currently more clean tech workers in San Diego County than there are coal miners in all of the United States.
Love it. Jesse, you always have great stats. You're going to be my stat guy. I'm just going to keep coming to you for interesting, fun facts.
Mark, guys, how do we move faster? What's your answer?
I think you guys touched on it. I mean, certainly getting investors involved is key. But I think even the step even behind that is, or before that is just education.